right, so I'm going to show you today how to make a silhouetted wall sign that we can CNC mill. It's something I saw at a big fair here in New England that I went to last week, and I thought they were really cool. There was a booth that had tons of these signs on the wall with all different sayings, and the key to them was that all the letters were connected so that when they were milled out, it's all one piece. It's not individual letters that are going to fall around. So we're going to do this today using Adobe Illustrator, and I've already opened up a document that's 16 inches wide by 8 inches tall. I'm going to mill this out on a Stepcraft 420, so this is a good workpiece size for that machine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the text tool, and I'm using Palantino font, and I've set it up to bold at 250 points. Now this is a good starting point for this font size because of the work area size. So we're just going to click anywhere, and we're going to type the capital letter L. Now you could just do OVE just like this, but the problem with this is that these letters are not connected. Now there are ways of doing it. You could select these three letters, you can go to the character, and you can move the letter spacing closer together until they touch. The problem with that is right here. See how the V is already touching the O, which is what I want because I want this little gap here, but the E isn't touching the V yet. So in order for me to get the E to touch the V, I would have to keep moving these closer together and until I get to a point where they're just squished too much, and I frankly don't like the way that looks. So we are going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to do each letter individually. Okay, so I'm going to do the O as its own letter. That's a small letter O. And then I am going to just keep this simple. I'll copy the O and paste it. And now I have a second O. And well, I guess it didn't paste it. There we go. And there's my third O. So there's my three letters. So what I'm going to do is make this O a V and make this O an E. Okay, now the next step is that I want to bring the E over, and I want it to be on the baseline of the V, so you can see the green line under the V. That's telling me that they're lined up on the bottom. And I want to move this in just till it's touching. Now the problem here is that I've got it touching in 2 points. I've got it touching here and here, and there's this small area right here. Depending on the end mill that you're using, that may be too small to mill out. And Cut2D will actually tell you this when you start setting it up, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it that way for now, and then I'm going to let Cut2D determine if the end mill is going to be sufficient to do that. Otherwise, it'll just merge together, which will still look fine in this particular project. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to move the O over. Again, we've got the green baseline. And on the V, what I want to do is on this one, I only want to touch it a little bit. And I'm hoping that this won't be too brittle. That's one thing you have to keep in mind. The only point of contact here is this little space. Now, granted, it's a round end mill, so where this sharp point is, it's going to be more rounded when that mills out, and the same thing in here. So that's going to give me a little bit more beef in there. And what I really want is I want that end mill to come up through here so you can see the definition between the O and the V. And I'm hoping that this will look fine. So now what I'm going to do is just highlight these three, and I'm going to go down here and align the bottoms. I just want to make sure that they're still aligned with each other. Then I'm going to go up to Object, and I'm going to group them so that I can move them together. Now I got to connect them to the L, and that's going to be relatively simple. We're just going to move it over until we have a little bit of meat here, because this is going to be relatively heavy, and this is where it's connected to the L. And even though they're touching, you can still definitively see that that's an L. So that is the silhouette that I'm looking for. And you can see that each of the letters are connected together. So when this mills out, it's going to mill all the way around, and this will become one piece. Now, as far as the physical size of this, we'll change that over in Vectric Cut 2D to be the size we want. This is a little too small right now for what I'd like the finished project to be, but rather than size it here, I'll do it in Cut 2D. So what I'm going to do is just save this file. I'm going to call it love. I'm going to save it as an AI file on my desktop and click OK. And that's it for Illustrator. Okay, now that we have the file exported from Adobe Illustrator, we're going to move to Vectric Cut 2D. We're going to open a new file. I've set the work material to 16 inches wide by 8 inches high. That's the piece of plywood that I'm going to be putting into the Stepcraft 420. I've got the thickness set to 0.25. The actual thickness of this material after using a caliper was 0.23. So this is good. We're going to pass the bit through by a little bit, which will give us a nice clean edge on both the top and the bottom. I've set the datum position to the lower left corner, and I'm working in inches. The next thing I want to do is I want to open up the AI file, which I will go to File, Open, Import Vectors, and I will scroll down to the LOVE file. And now what I want to do is just to make it easier to work with, I'm going to place it in the center of the work material. Now, right now I'm looking at this and I've got roughly 2.5 inches to 4.5 inches or so. So the L is about 2 inches tall, and I want to make it about twice that height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Move Scale icon, and I'm just going to drag the corner out until this is right around 4 inches. I'm not looking for it to be exact, but that's roughly the size that I want to see this cut out to. So now we got a couple things to look at here. When you import this from Illustrator, Cut 2D sees the outline of each letter, and even though we kind of merged them over one another, you can see how the outlines cross over into the other letters. Now this is going to be a problem because if I were to create a toolpath of this right now, Vectric is going to think that we're going to cut the outline out of each one, so it's going to pass through here. You're going to end up with kind of funny looking letters, but they'll all be done individually. So what I need to do is I need to weld all of the letters together. So I can do this by selecting everything so it's all dashed, and I can go over to the weld button over here, and the one thing I want to have you watch is the O, the center of the O and the center of the E, the two holes there. When I click the weld button, they're going to disappear. So it merged all the outlines into one, but it also took away the two holes. So I want to make sure that these holes remain. So I'm going to hold the Shift key and I'm going to deselect the two holes. Then I'm going to go back to the weld button. And now you can see how the L and the O and the V and the E, they're all connected together. And you've got one continuous outline, and we still have the hole in the O and in the V. Now this area here and this little spot here, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. At this size that I scaled this to, most likely this is going to disappear, and this channel here is going to be a little bit larger than what it's showing here. Now I could use a really small, like a 1mm end mill, and I could probably get this detail back, but this isn't that fine of a detail. I think I'll be okay just with a basic outline. So the next step would be to create a toolpath. So you go to Switch to Toolpaths tab, and we're going to do a profile toolpath because we want to cut along the outside. So my start depth is 0 inches, which is the top of the work surface. I'm going to cut down 0.25 inches. Remember I said the material is 0.23, so we're going to go straight through and we're going to cut into the spoil board a little bit, which is what I want to do. Now I could select the tool for this, and I'm going to do this with a 2mm end mill. And the reason for that is I have a diamond end mill, which works really good for plywood. It doesn't leave a lot of fray. And I don't have the diamond end mill in imperial sizes. So I'm going to do this with a 2mm. Now, what's important to note too is with Cut 2D, what a really nice feature is I set in the original material, I set it to inches, but yet I'm using a metric end mill. The software does all the calculations for you, so you can mix and match. I could have drawn this in metric and used an imperial end mill, or vice versa. It really doesn't matter. It does all the calculations, and when it exports the G code, everything is as it should, to give you the right output so you can see what's on your screen. So I'm going to machine the vector in a climb fashion, which is fine for this particular end mill. It doesn't matter which direction we're moving. I don't need tabs. I did set it to 4 passes. I don't really need to go 4. I could go less, so I could clear all passes, and we could essentially do this in 2 passes without a problem. We would basically be removing about 1/8 of an inch per. 3 is a good number because it's not really stressing out the end mill or the machine. So let's set that to 3, and we'll click calculate. Now I chose a dark cherry for the background wood just so I could definitively see what it's going to look like. And if I do preview all toolpaths, I could see here is what it's going to look like. And I do have a little bit of a hole right here, which I lost the hole here, but I ended up, instead of this channeling all the way up, I ended up with a little hole, and I'm not too sure that I really like that. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to go over to Node Edit, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and we're just going to move this gap down a hair. Now, by doing that, when I go back and I select all of this and I go to my tool path, still at 2mm, and I recalculate it, now I reset the preview and I preview all tool paths, and you can see that little hole is gone. So I have a nice definition here. If you double click on the material, it disappears. So I can double click on that, and this is what I'll be left with. You can rotate it and see exactly what you have. Now I'm happy with that. I like the way it looks. I didn't really want to get involved with a 1mm end mill for this particular thing, because they tend to be more brittle, and I'll have to run it slower. So for this sign, I think this looks great. It's easy to tell what the letters are, even though this is merged here and here. So now what I need to do is I need to export the toolpath. So I'm going to make sure that I've selected this profile 2. I'm going to click Save Toolpath. I'm going to choose the Mach 2.3 ARCS millimeter post processor because I'm using a Stepcraft with UC CNC. I'm going to click Save Toolpath, and I'm just going to call this LOVE, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. And that's it. Now I'm ready to take the file and move over to my mill to cut it out.